This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to a holiday edition of Open Mic Night. I'm your host, Noah Tsaluki, and on today's episode, we have a loaded Thanksgiving Day dish for you. The Lions losing 20-0 in an embarrassing loss, putting them at 4-6 against the Carolina Panthers. We'll break down that loss for you. And is there any hope of salvaging this season with a win over the Houston Texans, and about Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn's future as well? Also, we're going to break down the Pistons draft. I know we haven't talked about Pistons in a while, but definitely an awesome draft to see. And Troy Weaver making a lot of free agent moves. We'll break that down later as well. Also, want to discuss a little bit about Michigan football with Cade McNamara, the new quarterback that all of a sudden is the savior for Michigan yet again. We'll talk more about that as well. And I want to end the show with my top 5 Lions Thanksgiving memories that I've had in my lifetime. So it's going to be an awesome show. I'm really, really excited. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend. I know the weather is getting bad, but Thanksgiving is in the air, and it just reminds me of the holidays. Ringing in the holiday season. Really excited. This is one of my favorite times of the year, but unfortunately for the Lions on Sunday, losing to the Carolina Panthers 20-0. I actually had cousins at that game. First people that I know outside of the media that have been to an NFL game this season. They definitely said the experience was a lot different. They could hear the players on the field. At Carolina, they had to sit in the lower bowl. There was not much seating in the upper bowl, so they were pretty close to the action actually, but they could hear a lot more of what was going on the field, and no traffic after the game, they said, either. So it was awesome that they at least got to go to an NFL game and provide a unique perspective to me when I was texting them afterwards. The Lions getting shut out for the first time since Stafford's rookie season in 2009. I got to be honest, folks. I don't think anybody in Lions community or around the NFL saw this coming. I mean, look, I get it. Kenny Galladay's out. DeAndre Swift had a concussion. Danny Amendola is out. But this gives you no excuse to get shut out against the 4-7 Carolina Panthers. And on top of that, Teddy Bridgewater was out. Had a bum knee all week and decided to test it out during pregame warmups, and he just said, "Nope, I'm not going in. I can't play today." So then PJ Walker comes in, former XFL quarterback, puts on a clinic, 24 of 34, 258 yards. He did throw 2 interceptions, but it didn't matter because the Panthers won the football game. But I will say this, Lions fans, I will say this. I'm not excusing the Lions right here. This was a poor performance. But all I'm saying is that Matt Rule, the rookie head coach for the Panthers, was the head coach at Temple, and his quarterback was PJ Walker. So all I'm saying is that Matt Rule knows PJ Walker like the back of his hand. You know, he knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses, he knows how to get him into the best situations. And I'm not saying that that was the reason that they won. I'm just saying, you know, I don't think that hurts. You know, and also, I don't know if the Lions necessarily studied film on him. You know, it seems like they were more prepared for Teddy Bridgewater than PJ Walker, but still, this does not excuse the fact that the Panthers just absolutely destroyed the Lions in all cylinders on Sunday. I mean, the Lions' defensive backs looked lost yet again, allowing DJ Moore to go for over 120 yards, Curtis Samuel picking up a touchdown on 70 yards as well. I mean, we're in week 11, folks. We're in week 11, and they still can't get the defensive backfield figured out. Okudah is still getting burned on deep routes. He's not even starting anymore. He's not even starting. They got Aruarie starting. Okay, and Desmond Trufant getting burned again on that deep route. You know, I saw it on Lions 3 and Out. I watch that every week. I know. I watch Lions 3 and Out with Chris Spielman and Michael Hara from DetroitLions.com. But I like it because they break down some of these plays, some of these turning point plays in the game, and that certainly was one. They're talking about how Desmond Trufant was just so out of position on that touchdown that he gave up, and it just made me think, this was a theme throughout the whole game. The Lions were just out of position, and I remember thinking, where's the discipline? That's a discipline. That's a coaching thing. When you're out of position like that, that falls on the coach. Right? Matt Patricia not getting it done again. And I know we've had debates about this, you know, when is he going to leave? You know, is he going to stay the whole year? Folks, it's time. I think after Thanksgiving, win or lose, they should fire him. And it makes me think of Steve Mariucci back in 2005 when he was fired after Thanksgiving after a 4-7 start. And I think it's time, and I think Bob Quinn also leaves. They're going to be totally erasing the chalkboard for next year. They're going to restart. They have to. They have no other choice. These guys can't come back. Asterisk year or not, these guys will never be welcome back here in Detroit and with the Lions. No, not after all the damage that they've done. Also, the offensive line, giving up 5 sacks. Taylor Decker, they talk about how awesome he was this whole year. I believe he gave up 2 sacks. Unbelievable. Your line is expected to block. And look, I get it. I know that the Lions scored that touchdown, but then it was called back on the illegal formation. Crazy. Another out of position play. That was probably the most creative play call that we've seen in Bevel in many, many games. Pitching it to the running back, throwing it back to Stafford, and then throwing it deep to Marvin Jones. That at least gave the Lions some energy, but then it was called back. Nothing was going the Lions' way. Unbelievable. I thought this was going to be a guaranteed win, basically, for the Lions. Once I saw P.J. Walker was starting and they had no Christian McCaffrey, it just made me think, well, this is automatic. I don't care if we don't have Kenny Golladay or DeAndre Swift, Danny Amendola. It's okay. We're still going to win. And it just makes me think of all the times that I've been a Lions fan, how they've let me down in critical games. In big games or against good teams, when they're somewhat still in the hunt, which the Lions were before, they were still in that wild card hunt. I thought maybe they had a chance. I should have known better. I should have known better from history that the Lions just never can play well in big games. And I know Carolina's not a good team, but this was a big game for the Lions. And they still came away empty-handed. They couldn't even score a point. Embarrassing effort. And let's just hope that the Lions don't get destroyed on national TV on CBS on Thursday when they play host to the Houston Texans and dual-threat quarterback Deshaun Watson. I don't know, folks. The Lions, in some years, they play with a lot of different energy on Thanksgiving. I know for sure, for me as a fan, it just always feels different in a good way on Thanksgiving, and it's a special feeling. You never know what this team, this team could be on one week and then off the other. I kind of feel like the Lions might actually win this game against the Texans. I think the players are aware of the hot seat that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are on. I just feel like they're going to try to at least get one more win before they get to the brunt of their schedule against the Bears, Bucks, Vikings, Titans, all them. So I think the Lions are going to come away victorious on Thanksgiving. We shall see with the turkey, but I want to talk about this Pistons draft. Now, I'm going to say this about the Pistons first before we begin any talk. I've told you guys in the past, I'm not that big of a Pistons fan. I'm not as into them as some other people are. I do want them to succeed. I do. I'm just not as much into them as some other. And that's part of the reason why we haven't talked about them a whole lot. But I will say this. This last week with the Pistons made me more interested in them than ever before, than I've been in 10 years. They are actually having a plan. Troy Weaver is actually having a plan with this Pistons team. Now, whether it works or not is a whole different story, but this franchise for the last 10 years has not really had a plan. They have not really had a plan in place for the future. We're going to sign Blake Griffin, old Blake Griffin, 2 years ago. Just to get seats, just to fill seats at the new Little Caesars Arena, thinking that they have a playoff team. I know the Pistons made the playoffs 2 years in the last decade, but did they really have a chance? No. There was no plan in place. All of a sudden, Troy Weaver comes in, and I was worried at first. I thought maybe he might be a puppet for Uncle Ed and Uncle Arn. The guys that are in the front office with Tom Gores for the Pistons. But you know what last week showed me? Last week showed me that Troy Weaver is his own guy. He is here to make his own decisions. I have a buddy that I text all the time that he's a diehard Piston fan. And I've been telling him for years, ever since high school, the Pistons need to just completely gut this roster and completely rebuild. And to me, it just never seemed like that they did that. They always kind of thought, we might have a chance. If we just get that one more piece. If Andre can shoot. Blake Griffin. He's it. He's the reason we need to go to the playoffs. Troy Weaver walks in, and you know what he does? as soon as possible, he starts gutting this roster completely. And I love it. I love the whole idea of trading Luke Kennard, of getting Trevor Ariza, a very, very protected first-round pick that the Pistons gave to Houston. I like how they were getting guys like Mason Plumlee and Jahlil Okafor, Josh Jackson, Jeremy Grant. Some of those guys that weren't really panning out on their other teams like Jahlil Okafor, maybe giving him another chance to see what he can do. The only other thing I really want Troy to do now is to get rid of Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin. Totally revamp this roster. And I'm very, very excited about it. This is the most excited I've been for the Pistons' future ever. Never been this excited because I'm really happy that they're at least having a plan. Now, if the plan works in 5 years or not, that's out of the question. We still have to wait and see on that. But even if it doesn't work, I'm still going to applaud Troy Weaver for actually trying, because that's what nobody's done in the last 10 years is try with this team. Try to strip down the roster and rebuild. Nobody's ever acknowledged the true rebuild, in my opinion, with the Pistons. Troy Weaver comes in and is 100% acknowledging that this is a full rebuild. And I love it. This is first-round picks, Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and Sadiq Bey. And I'm not going to go into the whole details on them. Killian Hayes, they say, is the point guard of the future for the Pistons. And I'm not going to argue that or anything. But the point is that Troy acquired first-round picks. He got more chances at more pieces to build to this rebuilding team. If they don't work out, they don't work out. But at least there's a plan in place. And I applaud Troy Weaver for doing that. We'll have to see how good or how bad this team is for next year, because if this season, they don't play well, they could have a chance at the number one pick, and there's a lot of talent in next year's draft. So the Pistons, they could just be stockpiling these early picks and building for the future. And that's what they need, the NBA. They need to build this team up so they can be competitive in the next couple years. So definitely excited about the Pistons' future, more than I've ever been in my entire lifetime. All right, I want to talk about Michigan now. And whoa, boy, 3 overtimes it took to beat Rutgers, 48-42. I'll give Michigan. Okay, that's a good win. I'll give them that. Rutgers, obviously. But I will say this. Greg Schiano doing a lot better job with that team. That team is more prepared, more physical. At least now they're putting up more points against bigger opponents. So that's really, really good to see for Rutgers. This is definitely an improved team. They're definitely fighting in more games. Michigan finally getting a win after the Minnesota game at the beginning of the season. They're 2-3 now. Joe Milton replaced by Cade McNamara, who had an absolute field day. But now you see the press. They're going to Cade McNamara. Oh, he's the quarterback now. He's it. Kind of like they did with Joe Milton at the beginning of the season. Remember that? Remember how they said that Joe Milton was going to be the savior? But then the Michigan press just moves right on. Oh, Cade, 4 touchdowns against Rutgers. You're the savior of the program now. Totally forgetting about Joe Milton. I just find that interesting because, like I said about Joe Milton against Minnesota, it's one game. It's one game, folks. And fans love the hype. They love getting hype over individual players, the 5 stars. Signing of the stars event or whatever it's called in Ann Arbor. Give Cade McNamara a shot. I think he deserves it, but am I going to anoint him the savior of the Michigan football program? No, I think they need to move on from Joe Milton because he hasn't done anything this season. At least go with a new face. Cade McNamara at least gives you some sort of hope, if you want to even call it that. I'm not even going to call I don't want to call it that. I think it's more of just trying to see if he fits, maybe. But, I don't even think Harbaugh is going to be here next season. So will it all matter in the end? I don't know. Michigan now with 3 games left on their schedule. 2 home games, one against Penn State and Maryland, and then the big one at Ohio State. We're going to have to see. Penn State off to their worst start ever. So maybe Michigan can capitalize on that. We'll see. Maryland, another team. Tua's brother is the quarterback. Their game got canceled against Michigan State this past weekend. And then Ohio State. Basically, the storyline behind that will be how big will Ohio State win by? Because Michigan, there's no chance that they're going to win that game. None. But, I guess if Michigan beats Penn State, and I guess if they beat Maryland, at least they have something to play for against Ohio State. I guess just for pride or something like that. I still don't think Michigan has a shot. And I don't see any hope for Michigan in the future, and I think it's just time. I think it's time that Harbaugh goes, regardless of what happens the next 3 games. It just unfortunately has not worked out, and he was really the perfect guy for this program. You think about it, Michigan man, former quarterback, a Bo disciple. He knew the culture better than anybody. There's got to be some coach out there that actually gets the culture of Michigan and gets it in a way to inspire his players to win. And Harbaugh just has not done that in the big games. Because in college football, big-time college football, it's all about winning those big games. And Harbaugh just has not been able to do it. All right, so that's my little spiel about Michigan. I'm going to move on now to close out the program with my top 5 Lions Thanksgiving memories. And Lions football, obviously, as you know, if you listen to this podcast, is very, very special to me. And I've been a fan of the Lions for a very, very long time. And just coupled with the Thanksgiving tradition, it just makes it very special. And it's a very special feeling for me to watch the Lions on Thanksgiving Day, knowing that they're on national television. Lions, we're not just localized for one game. We're actually, everybody in the nation can see us, which is a great, great feeling. So I've been to 3 Lions Thanksgiving games, including my first ever NFL game. So I went in 2005 when they played Michael Vick and the Falcons. We'll talk more about that game later. I also went in 2015 when they played the Eagles. I believe Big Sean did the halftime show as well. And then I went a couple of years ago in 2018 when Eddie Jackson had the pick 6 and the Bears beat the Lions 23-16. All right, so here we go with my top 5 Lions Thanksgiving memories. And the only rules I have for this one are it has to be in my lifetime, or at least when I became a Lions fan. So definitely in those realms. So I'm not going like pre-2000 here. I'm staying within the millennium. So my number 5, it goes back to 2010 when the Lions played the Patriots. And I know the Lions got blown out, but I remember this game really well because of the throwback uniforms that the Lions wore. That was like one of the only times I ever saw the Lions wear those old throwback uniforms. And then the Patriots wore their throwback uniforms with the old Pat Patriot on the side of their white helmets with the old red jerseys. Tom Brady put on an absolute clinic. But it was still fun. I remember really, really enjoying, seeing the Super Bowl, the 3-time Super Bowl champions at the time, and Bill Belichick come out against the Lions on Thanksgiving in front of a national television audience. And definitely my favorite halftime show that I've seen with the Lions on Thanksgiving was that one. I really, really enjoyed that Kid Rock show. I remember I was dancing like crazy during that as a little kid. So that's definitely my number 5 one. So my number 4 one, we got to go back to 2011. So the year after, remember the Lions were in playoff contention. They ended up making the playoffs as a 10-6 wild card team, and Calvin Johnson just had an absolutely beast of a season, 16 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford, 41 touchdown passes, 5,038 passing yards. But this game was unique because, if anyone remembers, Ndamukong Suh stomped on Aaron Rodgers. The Lions were losing. They were probably going to lose the game when this happened, and Suh just out of nowhere, just out of frustration, just pretended like he was just walking, but then all of a sudden he just stomped out of nowhere on Aaron Rodgers, and the flag was thrown, and then Suh got ejected. Just reminds me of the old Suh back in the day, and I remember thinking, because I remember seeing that off camera when I was watching that game live. I remember seeing like a little scuffle in the corner of the TV. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, was that Suh? And sure enough, they showed Suh on the replay, and I think, oh my gosh, he's gone. And sure enough, they ejected him. And I said, wow, I just never knew that frustration would boil over that much. So definitely remember that one at number 4. Number 3, I mentioned it, one of the 3 Thanksgiving games that I've been to, Lions versus Eagles, 2015. Lions blew the Eagles out 45-14. Calvin had three receiving touchdowns. I had him in fantasy that day. I had Stafford in fantasy. He threw for 5 touchdowns, I think. I mean, it was awesome. And the other thing that was awesome about it, too, was that the Lions don't blow teams out like that. They don't blow teams out 45-40. You don't see that often. That's a very, very rare occurrence for Lions. Usually, like we've mentioned on the podcast before, everything is just so close with this team. These gut-wrenching, last-second games, that get your heart pounding. At least we got to relax in this one. At least it was a blowout. At least we could just, have fun. And then the next week, I remember thinking to myself, like, I got to go to that game. That the Lions, they were in playoff contention at the time, and I was like, man, I got to go. And then, you know what that game turned out to be? The Hail Mary game with Aaron Rodgers on Thursday Night Football. Lions have not been on Thursday Night Football ever since. So it's just, I definitely remember that one. Big Sean did the halftime show as well. There was a lot of smoke, like cloud smoke from the halftime show. And I remember during the second half, you could just still see that smoke in the stadium as they showed those Calvin highlights catching those touchdowns. So definitely an awesome memory. Number 2, it's going to be Lions-Falcons 2005, my first Thanksgiving game that I ever attended. And I remember it was my uncle who actually lives in Atlanta, so he came up and watched the Falcons play with us, and my dad. We sat up, I remember, in the nosebleeds. I remember a ton of that game because I wasn't as into football back then as I was now, but I do remember getting like one of those pennant flags that had said like Thanksgiving 2005 on it. I still have it in my closet somewhere. But it was like in the concourse, and they were doing a little giveaway if you answered a question right or something, and my uncle was telling me what to say, and I ended up getting it. So I do remember that, and I remember him telling me afterwards that that's when Steve Mariucci got fired. So like I said before, we could see a similar situation in Detroit. If we lose, win, whatever, Matt Patricia being fired after Thanksgiving, much like Steve Mariucci was, with the same record. And my number one memory, I was not at this game, but it is a very, very memorable game. One of those games where I just remember where I was the whole time. Lions versus Texans. And the reason I say this is because the Lions are playing the Texans on Thursday. This was Lions-Texans back in 2012. This was a 34-31 overtime loss. And if anybody remembers, Justin Forsett had that like 70, 80-yard touchdown run. And he was down. I think he picked up like 4 or 5 yards, but he was down, obviously. But the ref never blew the whistle. He just kept running, and the ref signaled touchdown. Then Jim Schwartz throws out his challenge flag, which was the right thing to do. But at the time, the rule was you couldn't throw your challenge flag because the NFL, the referees already looked at those plays. That was before all the guaranteed, looking at scoring and turnover plays, the review. That was before all that. So then that was basically a penalty, and the touchdown ended up being good. Very, very fluky. Detroit versus everybody, one of those moments. Lions versus everybody, Lions versus the refs, whatever you want to call it. And I remember sitting in my grandpa's living room. It was on Thanksgiving, and I was just stunned. I mean, I could not stop thinking about that when we were eating our food. I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, why is it always the Lions versus everybody? Why do the refs have to screw this up? Because then 2 years ago, we were talking about the Bears game when Calvin Johnson made the catch, and then it was overturned because, he didn't have full possession and all that stuff. It just made me think of those moments with referees. And definitely one that I will always remember. And it's just fitting because the Lions play the Texans again on Thanksgiving. So I really hope you enjoyed those top 5 Lions Thanksgiving memories. And, I certainly have. Lions football has always been a part of my life on Thanksgiving. So wanted to do something a little creative for this special holiday edition of Open Mic Night. But thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Really, really hope you enjoyed it. Wish I could have gotten a guest this week. Still working on getting a couple. Just it was tough with the holiday and all that. So hopefully next week we're going to have a guest on talking, whatever, Lions football, whatever we can to make it work. So thanks again, folks, for tuning in. I really hope everybody has a great holiday weekend, and we'll see if the Lions do anything on Thanksgiving. We'll see what happens in the coming days. Will Matt Patricia be fired? Will Bob Quinn be fired? Will they stay till the end of the year? We will find out. We'll also keep track on the Pistons, see if they make any more moves to a gut their roster even more, a makeshift roster with a bunch of new names. So it'll be interesting to see. But thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and happy Thanksgiving, only on Open Mic Night.